Chapter 12 of A Strange Manuscript Found in a Copper Cylinder. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Galen Darnell. A Strange Manuscript Found in a Copper Cylinder by James DeMille. Chapter 12. The Baleful Sacrifice. I resolved to go on no more sacred hunts. I was sickened at the horrible cruelty, the needless slaughter, the mad self-sacrifice which distinguished them. I was overwhelmed with horror at the merciless destruction of brave comrades, whose wounds, so gallantly received, should have been enough to inspire pity even in a heart of stone. The gentleness, the incessant kindness, the matchless generosity of these people seemed all a mockery. What availed it all, when the same hand that heaped favors upon me, the guest, could deal death without compunction upon friends and relatives? It seemed quite possible for the Kohen to kill his own child, or cut the throat of his wife, if the humor seized him. And how long could I hope to be spared among a people who had this insane thirst for blood? Some more joms had passed, and the light season had almost ended. The sun had been sinking lower and lower. The time had at last come when only a portion of his disk would be visible for a little while above the hills, and then he would be seen no more for 6 months of our time. This was the dark season, and, as I had already learned, its advent was always hailed with joy and celebrated with solemn services, for the dark season freed them from their long confinement, permitted them to go abroad, to travel by sea and land, to carry on their great works, to indulge in all their most important labors and favorite amusements. The Kohen asked me to be present at the great festival, and I gladly consented. There seemed to be nothing in this that could be repellent. As I was anxious to witness some of their purely religious ceremonies, I wished to go. When I told Alma, she looked sad but said nothing. I wondered at this, and asked her if she was going. She informed me that she would have to go, whereupon I assured her that this was an additional reason why I should go. I went with Alma. The Kohen attended us with his usual kind and gracious consideration. It seemed almost as though he was our servant. He took us to a place where we could be seated, although all the others were standing. Alma wished to refuse, but I prevailed upon her to sit down, and she did so. The scene was upon the semicircular terrace in front of the cavern, and we were seated upon a stone platform beside the chief portal. A vast crowd was gathered in front. Before us arose the half pyramid of which I have already spoken. The light was faint. It came from the disk of the sun, which was partly visible over the icy crest of the distant mountains. Far away the sea was visible, rising high over the tops of the trees, while overhead the brighter stars were plainly discernible. The Kohen ascended the pyramid, and others followed. At the base there was a crowd of men, with emaciated forms and faces, and coarse, squalid attire, who looked like the most abject paupers, and seemed the lowest in the land. As the Kohen reached the summit, there arose a strange sound, a mournful, plaintive chant, which seemed to be sung chiefly by the paupers at the base of the pyramid. The words of this chant I could not make out, but the melancholy strain affected me in spite of myself. There was no particular tune, and nothing like harmony, but the effect of so many voices uniting in this strain was very powerful and altogether indescribable. In the midst of this I saw the crowd parting asunder, so as to make way for something, and through the passage thus formed I saw a number of youths in long robes, who advanced to the pyramid, singing as they went. Then they ascended the steps 2 by 2, still singing, and at length reached the summit, where they arranged themselves in order. There were 30 of them, and they arranged themselves in 3 rows of 10 each, and as they stood they never ceased to sing, while the paupers below joined in the strain. And now the sun was almost hidden, and there was only the faintest line from the upper edge of his disk perceptible over the icy mountain tops. The light was a softened twilight glow. It was to be the last sight of the sun for 6 months, and this was the spectacle upon which he threw his parting beam. So the sun passed away, and then there came the beginning of the long dark season. At first, however, there was rather twilight than darkness, and this twilight continued long. All this only served to heighten the effect of this striking scene, and as the light faded away I looked with increasing curiosity upon the group at the top of the pyramid. Alma was silent. I half turned and said something to her about the beauty of the view. She said nothing, but looked at me with such an expression that I was filled with amazement. I saw in her face something like a dreadful anticipation, something that spoke of coming evil. The feeling was communicated to me, and I turned my eyes back to the group on the pyramid with vague fears in my soul. Those fears were but too well founded, for now the dread ceremony began. The Kohen drew his knife and placed himself at the head of the stone table. One of the youths came forward, stepped upon it, and lay down on his back with his head toward the Kohen. The mournful chant still went on. Then the Kohen raised his knife and plunged it into the heart of the youth. I sat for a moment rooted to the spot. Then a groan burst from me in spite of myself. Alma caught my hand in hers, which were as cold as ice. "Be firm," she said, "or we are both lost. Be firm, Atem Or." "I must go," said I, and I tried to rise. "Don't move," she said, "for your life. We are lost if you move. Keep still. Restrain yourself. Shut your eyes." I tried to do so, but could not. There was a horrible fascination about the scene, which forced me to look and see all. The Kohen took the victim, and drawing it from the altar, threw it over the precipice to the ground beneath. Then a loud shout burst forth from the great crowd. "Sibgu, Sibgan, Renenu, Hodu Likosk," which means, "Sacrifice the victims, rejoice, give thanks to darkness." Then another of the youths went forward amid the singing, and laid himself down to meet the same fate. And again the corpse was flung from the top of the pyramid, and again the shout arose. All the others came forward in the same manner. Oh, horrible, horrible, thrice horrible spectacle! I do not remember how I endured it. I sat there with Alma, trying to restrain myself, as she had entreated me, more for her sake than for my own, a prey to every feeling of horror, anguish, and despair. How it all ended I do not know, nor do I know how I got away from the place, for I only remember coming back to my senses in the lighted grotto, with Alma bending anxiously over me. After this there remained a dark mystery and an ever-present horror. I found myself among a people who were at once the gentlest of the human race and the most bloodthirsty, the kindest and the most cruel. This mild, amiable, and self-sacrificing Kohen, how was it possible that he should transform himself to a fiend incarnate? And for me and for Alma, what possible hope could there be? What fate might they have in reserve for us? Of what avail was all this profound respect, this incessant desire to please, this attention to our slightest wish, this comfort and luxury and splendor, this freedom of speech and action? Was it anything better than a mockery? Might it not be the shallow kindness of the priest to the victim reserved for the sacrifice? Was it, after all, in any degree better than the kindness of the cannibal savages on those drear outer shores, who received us with such hospitality, but only that they might destroy us at last? Might they not all belong to the same race, dwelling as they did in caverns, shunning the sunlight, and blending kindness with cruelty? It was an awful thought. Yet I had one consolation. Alma was with me, and so long as she was spared to me I could endure this life. I tried for her sake to resist the feelings that were coming over me. I saw that she too was prey to ever-deepening sadness. She felt as I did, and this despair of soul might wreck her young life if there were no alleviation. and so I sought to alleviate her distress and to banish her sadness. The songs of these people had much impressed me, and one day as I talked about this with Alma, she brought forth a musical instrument of peculiar shape, which was not unlike a guitar, though the shape was square and there were a dozen strings. Upon this she played, singing at the same time songs of a plaintive character. An idea now occurred to me to have an instrument made according to my own plans, which should be nothing less than a violin. Alma was delighted at the proposal, and at once found a very clever workman who, under my direction, succeeded in producing one which served my purpose well. I was a good violinist, and in this I was able to find solace for myself and for Alma for many a long hour. The first time that I played was memorable. As the tones floated through the air, they caught the ears of those outside, and soon great numbers came into the apartment, listening in amazement and in rapt attention. Even the painful light was disregarded in the pleasure of this most novel sensation, and I perceived that if the sense of sight was deficient among them, that of hearing was sufficiently acute. I played many times, and sometimes sang from among the songs of different nations, but those which these people liked best were the Irish and Scottish melodies, those matchless strains created by the genius of the Celtic race, and handed down from immemorial ages through long generations. In these there was nothing artificial, nothing transient. They were the utterance of the human heart, and in them there was that touch of nature which makes all men kin. These were the immortal passions which shall never cease to affect the soul of man, and which had power even here. The strains of love, of sadness, and of pathos were sweet and enticing to this gentle race, for in their mild manners and their outburst of cruelty they seemed to be not unlike the very race which had created this music, since the Celt is at once gentle and bloodthirsty. I played Tara, Bonnie Doon, The Last Rose of Summer, The Land of the Leal, Old Lang Syne, Lochaber. They stood entranced, listening with all their souls. They seemed to hunger and thirst after this music, and the strains of the inspired Celtic race seemed to come to them like the revelation of the glory of heaven. Then I played more lively airs. Some I played a second time, singing the words. They seemed eager to have the same one played often. At last a grisly thought came to me. It was that they would learn these sweet strains and put their own words to them, so as to use them at the awful sacrifices. After that I would play no more. It is a land of tender love and remorseless cruelty. Music is all-powerful to awaken the one, but powerless to abate the other. And the eyes that weep over the pathetic strains of Lochaber can gaze without a tear upon the death agonies of a slaughtered friend. End of chapter 12.